Hi, everybody. Welcome to Girl Woman with Lara Rathod. And today is a very, very special day for me because I am interviewing Anya Ng-A-Fook on being a teenager. Now, full disclosure, Anya is my goddaughter. She's my niece and goddaughter, but she's my first female goddaughter, and she's the first teenager I'm interviewing. And who knew, Anya, that 15 years on from when you used to fall asleep on my chest and I used to stroke your hair, that we would be doing this together. I'm so happy to be co-creating this with you, my love.
I am as well.
Okay, so Anya, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. And for everybody that's watching, if this is the first episode you're watching, you'll notice that my guests introduce themselves in a very intentional way. And there is a reason for that. The first is that I want people who are watching to be able to see themselves represented in my guest. And the second is to help contextualize their lived experience. So Anya, over to you.
I am Anya Ng-A-Fook. My pronouns are she, her. I was born in the US. My heritage is Indian and Chinese, and I was born Christian, but I am questioning and exploring new religions and what kind of fits with me.
Lovely. Thank you, my love. So I told you this on the pre-call, which I hadn't told you before, which was the idea for Girl Woman came up all of a sudden. It popped into my head. And the very first thing that I thought is that this would be a beautiful gift for you and Elsa, who I will also be interviewing. And the reason is that since Uncle Shane died suddenly, almost 11 years ago, I've been very aware of the fact that life is fragile and sometimes people can be taken from you in an instant and you don't get a chance to say all the things you wanted to say, but also you don't get a chance to kind of pass on the things that you've learned. And so that's why this is very special for me, because I want this to be my gift to you and Elsa, so that you have access to a lot of different people's wisdom and stories and lived experiences. And hopefully you guys can learn some of the lessons that took us a lot longer to learn. Okay? So, Anya, tell me 4 words that you think describe you. How would you describe yourself?
I would like to say resourceful, energetic. I would also like to say independent, and creative, because I like to draw and all of these things that include expressing yourself. So those are 4 words that I think describe me.
I love that. Nobody's creative has definitely been a theme across most of my guests, so that's kind of interesting for me. But nobody's ever described themselves as resourceful. Tell me about that word. What does that mean for you, and how did you kind of think of that? Why did you think of that?
To me, resourceful is it's pretty simple word. It's just finding things that may not have been the original plan, but because something's gone wrong or something has happened, you've had to change like a path or your
opinion.
You've had to come up with things, and I find that resourcefulness kind of stems from that. So your resourcefulness to adapt to different changes in your life.
Yeah,
So,
and you know what? It's really interesting that you picked that word, being a teenager as well, because that is something that is going to stay with you and be very, very useful as you move through your life. Because the only constant in life is that life is change, and so we need to be resourceful, because more often than not, things don't go according to plan. And so we have to learn how to be adaptable and how to be receptive and how to deal with uncertainty. I mean, we all learned that lesson last year, right? COVID.
Yeah.
Like, who would have thought? Who would have thought that something like that could possibly happen? But it did. And I guess you also saw how resourceful the schools were in allowing you guys to be able to do lessons online and you know, keep up with that.
Yeah, that was an interesting topic, because when I switched to online school, because my parents weren't comfortable with me going into school because of my aunts and grandaunt. There were a lot of issues actually with Wi-Fi at school, like the computers shutting down because there wasn't enough charge in them, and there were so many changes made to like the school curriculum actually as well, because of all of the distance learning and the needing to have students taught, because you can't just pause an entire year of your life.
Yeah.
The rest of the world still goes on, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I guess it helped you, I guess, appreciate learning in a different way too, right?
Yeah, it did. It helped me realize that not everything will always be there for you to have. Because school was kind of a constant for me, and it still is.
Yeah.
I actually took going to school in person for granted, because that was kind of just something that always happened. So for that to suddenly be taken away, I realized, wow, I don't actually get to see my friends every single day of the year minus weekends. And the relationship between teacher and student can't be formed without being there in person. Because when I was through a screen, there wasn't enough social interaction for there to be a substantial teacher-student relationship. And if I were to ask a question, the teacher wouldn't always take it as serious as students that were actually going in person once that was allowed.
Yeah, it must be extremely difficult to figure out how to do in person and online, like that hybrid model. I mean, I hats off to all the teachers, because I know that they put in so much, like teachers all around the world. You know, I really hope that this is something that we remember going forward, how valuable and important really great teachers are. Talking about COVID, like, are there any, it was obviously like so much change for everyone, and there were so many difficult things through it. But are there any kind of good things or anything that you kind of felt was a positive that came out of that time?
I believe that a couple of things good did come out. My friendships, some friendships, like relationships with people I lost because the distance, they didn't feel the need to keep up with me, or I didn't feel the need to keep up with them. And it kind of showed me who my real friends were, and showed me that, yes, even though everyone has their own life and everyone's kind of stuck behind walls, some people still had the thought to, oh, Anya, I haven't talked to Anya in a while. I should do that. Or maybe I should FaceTime her because we haven't talked in like a month or a week or a day. And that kind of showed me, well, wow, there are a lot of fake people in my life that I don't want there, because it had a negative impact, a long-term negative impact on me.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that, because the last interview I did with somebody that you know, Harveen, who taught you, she also brought up friendships and how the time of COVID was a very clarifying time for her. And there were some friendships that, you know, she realized she thought were really, really close. And then she realized that, you know, they weren't as close in the way that she thought. And then there were some people who she kind of got to know, and the friendship really developed through COVID. And for me, I also, you know, reevaluated some of my very significant relationships, and I ended some of those as well. So it's interesting that friendship and reevaluating relationships is something that I think is not just consistent with us, but I think I see a lot of people talking about that fact on social media. And in terms of building rapport through a screen, I know that it can be really, really hard to do that, you know, but as you know, you and I, you know, we have the ability to do that because we don't live in the same place. And for me, I'm very used to using technology to help cultivate that. Of course, it's not the same as being able to hug you in person and, you know, just like be there. But I think that when the will is there, one of the things that COVID taught us was that there are things that we didn't think were possible, but actually are. Maybe not as good as in person, but there's still the possibility. So there's flexibility in that. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention? You said there were a couple of things.
Another thing was the mental health, the taking care of one's mental health. I realized that not a lot of things were actually were healthy for me to do.
Oh,
like,
okay.
For instance, I actually still kind of do it, but I use things that I enjoy as distractions.
Okay.
And it kind of stops me from actually identifying the problem and fixing the problem. So for instance, I play Minecraft a lot. Mm-hmm. And I actually played like for a week straight. And I obviously with food breaks and bathroom breaks and mm-hmm. sleep breaks, but I got up, had breakfast, and I logged on to Minecraft. And that's all I did for an entire week. And that was extremely unhealthy because that was me kind of coping from not an episode, but more of a time where I wasn't in the right mindset, a healthy mindset, where I like was looking down on myself. Mm-hmm. I was comparing myself to others. And so I kind of use Minecraft as a way to, hey, look, here's something different to look at. Don't think about all of that. And then when I came out of that Minecraft, I guess, week, I realized, well, the problem's still there. So find a way to fix the problem, not like play Minecraft. And so that was another thing that came out of COVID. So.
Wow, I'm really touched that you shared that story because you're highlighting something that's really, really important, which is mental health, right? And there's been a lot of conversations about how our mental health will be affected down the line because of, you know, this collective experience that we've all been through. And we don't know exactly, you know, what the effects will be, but for you to realize and be able to tap into the feeling that, oh, I think my mental health isn't as good as it could be right now, right? That's really important for you to learn that as a teenager. I didn't learn that as a teenager. I don't think I even thought about mental health until my 30s when, you know, I got really burnt out. And then when my mental health was really not good. And it was like, okay, what's going on? So here you identified that, you know, there can be things that soothe you, right? Things that you do when you're feeling like your mental health isn't feeling great. There can be things that you turn to which are soothing, but soothing is different from numbing. And so that's an important distinction that you identified. But also, it's like, yes, you can soothe, but you still have to do the work to figure out what's going on, right?
Yeah, that's a key thing that I think lots of people forget to do.
Yeah, and I mean, because it's hard, Anya. It's hard to like figure out, right? Because we're living in a world, a society that's very fast moving and very kind of like hit on the next quick thing to make you feel better, right? And so it's a society that's like almost wanting us to numb. Here, have all of these things, all of these distractions. And so for you to like get to the point of, I've done the numbing, obviously not consciously when you were doing it, right? You did it because you just wanted to like distract yourself. But then you came to the end and you were like, problem's still there. And how did you figure out like that these were the kind of thoughts that you were having and this was the issue? Did you journal or did you sit with yourself, or like how did you figure it out by talking to somebody?
I was talking to one of my friends, and they'd said, whoa, they kind of pointed it out to me because I've known this person for ages. So they said, hey, yo, you seem a little bit depressed, you good? And I was like, now that you mention it, probably not. Like, then I started to pick out things that I saw that wasn't healthy, like how I was putting myself down a lot, me comparing myself to others. And then I was like, okay, now that you've mentioned it, no, here are some things that I've realized that I've been doing, and I should probably stop because it is not good. So
I'm glad that you have it, you have that safe space. And that's what we should all remember, it's like there generally are a person or persons in our life that we feel safe enough with that we can talk to, right? But the hard thing when our mental health is affected is that the voices are telling us nobody wants to listen. I'm not, enough, and all of these very unhelpful things that kind of keep us quiet. But I'm really glad that you had that experience and you were able to get a perspective from your friend and have a safe space. So figuring out, how the mind works is something that you've kind of been thinking about a little bit in terms of career, right?
yeah, I've been pretty interested in psychology. I always found it fascinating, like how people think, their reasons behind it, the thoughts behind the way they act as well, because that's also part of the brain. And that's always been something that's like, well, to me, something like as easy as putting a hair tie on my head can be so hard for others because maybe they don't understand it, and I'd like to figure out why they don't understand it and why it's so easy for me and it maybe isn't for them. Stuff like that kind of is like, well, I'd like to figure that out as well. So
and now you're gonna be taking a class, right, in high
actually,
school?
yeah, I finally got my school schedule, and I went to the school actually as well. Yeah, psychology is my first class, actually, first period. So
Oh wow, that's exciting. So that's a great way to start the school day as well. It's something that you're excited about.
yeah.
Oh well, I can't wait to learn along with you in the course of the coming year. um how does it feel being a teenager?
Well, to be a teenager is to be a mix of an adult and a child at the same time. So
Okay.
to ask how to be a teenage, like how it is to be a teenager, is asking what it's like to be a mini adult and child at the exact same time. So it's a little chaotic.
Okay.
I have I've been more independent in like my schoolwork, and my parents haven't been coming to check on me as much with my work. I mean, they did because I just kind of procrastinated 2 months worth of work. So they kind of checked on me a lot just the last day or so. But last year for school, I had all A's and B's, and they checked in like maybe once every week just to make sure I didn't need any help with schoolwork. And I kind of found that a little, not liberating, but
Refreshing.
it was refreshing because for so long they were always on me about doing work, having my work done, doing a checklist, and for them not to have been was nice because it made me have my own decisions about what and what not to do. Like the decision of, well, here's Minecraft, but I have homework. So I would pick the homework because the homework's due, and once the homework's done, I could go play Minecraft for as long as I want.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another thing would be that it's hard to distinguish whether I am an adult or a child now, actually, because the way that society works, in a way, I guess, is either you are an infant, like a little child, or you're someone that can think for yourself and make your own decisions.
Mhm.
There's no in between, because when we go out to eat, let's say, there's the kids menu and then there's the adult menu. And then once you reach 11 or 12 or maybe even 13 for some restaurants, it's the adult menu. Here are all of these choices. It's not, here's a mini introduction. It's
Like you're going from one to the other with this big jump almost.
And then there's some times when you're considered a child in some instances, and then you're considered an adult in others.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's a confusing part of being a teenager, but it's also quite fun because you get to explore life a little bit more. You have a little bit more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So especially with school, like classes choices, because before there wasn't really as many options to choose from.
Okay.
And now there's like psychology, there's sociology. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, sociology.
There's marine biology, there's computer science. Those options were not there for me when I was in middle school. So
it sounds exciting.
It really is. I had quite a hard time picking out my electives.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's basically sums up being a teenager. Pretty chaotic. But fun.
So in a transition, you're kind of in this transition age, right? Like what you're describing is that being a teenager is sort of like the bridge between childhood and adulthood.
Yeah.
And are you excited to become an adult?
I am, mainly for the one sole reason of being able to make my own decisions for things, because I always find like being able to pick and choose things that I would like versus having, let's say, my parents pick like what color book I choose or something.
Mm-hmm.
Normally that would be something they would choose, and let's say I was an adult and I was going to go get those things, I would be able to choose that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the extremely basic example, but yeah, so that's making decisions for myself, being more independent is something that I look forward to in being an adult.
I remember that feeling, actually. I don't think I quite put it into words like this, but like how you're describing that feeling of being able to make your own decisions, I think I really wanted that. So yeah, like the idea of becoming an adult. And I guess for me, it was more leaving school, like it was like leaving school and going to university. That was my first taste of really feeling like an adult, because there's different versions of it, right? And that was the version of, I was, making my own choices. I was living away from home. I got to decide what I did when. I got to decide whether I turned up to classes or not. That was the first time that, I had that level of freedom. And then there's a different stage of when you graduate and then you get a job, and, that's a different level. So yeah, it's so exciting that you have all of these stages to come.
Yeah, I'm excited for all of those stages as well.
So in terms of making decisions, I know that there are a few decisions that right now, you have some restrictions on. So like clothing restrictions and screen time. Like let's talk a little bit about those, and then we can talk into the general messages about girls and boys in culture.
So I do have clothing restrictions, and some of those clothing restrictions I 100% agree on. Like I will not be walking out of the house in a tiny piece of cloth just barely covering my chest and skimpy little bikini bottom shorts barely covering my butt. I will never walk out of the house in that. If I do, it's to go to the beach. But there are other clothing restrictions that I don't agree on necessarily, like crop tops and crop tops that only show a little bit of my midriff. And because I actually do have one of those shirts in my closet that I'm not allowed to wear outside the house, but I'm allowed to wear inside the house. So one day, hopefully, when I'm able to talk to my parents more about this, I will be able to wear that shirt outside because it really is a gorgeous shirt. So that's something that I like and don't like at the same time. But there are reasons for that, and I do understand those reasons. So I see why there are restrictions placed on my clothing, apparel.
Yeah, apparel.
For screen time, I don't have screen time timers per se. Like in the morning when I get up, I'm not allowed to get on my phone right away. But after I like read or I do work or something, or do something that isn't remotely brain numbing, then I'll be able to get on my phone. And once I get on my phone, there's no like 30-minute timer and then you have to get off. It's kind of an understanding between me and my parents that I'm not to be on it the entire day. And when I'm with family, not on my phone. When we're out, not to look down at my phone when I walk. When I'm also out, I'm supposed to be aware of my surroundings.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah. So there are things like that. When I'm at home, they're not overly obsessive about my screen time or anything. I could be on it for like an hour one day and like 5 hours the next. And
so it sounds like it's very fluid, but I think obviously with COVID as well, that's probably relaxed a little bit, right?
It was relaxed a little bit, but when I did get my phone, there's only app restrictions. Like I'm not allowed to have certain applications because of the people that I have no control over and stuff like that. So that's something that I kind of agree on as well, because what if I'm like supposedly talking to a friend, but it's really some like
person pretending
30-year-old dude that lives in his mom's basement or something.
Let's go with the obvious stereotype there. Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like with all these restrictions, right, like parents are doing the best that they can. And I think that with the screen time, not looking at your phone right away, that is a really healthy thing to do. And it's something that I think a lot of adults are now trying to figure out how to navigate their relationship with their phones, myself included. I used to charge my phone like right next, like on my bedside table. Then last year, after I sort of did a 36-hour Vipassana meditation with like no technology, no nothing, right? Just being me and my breath and my thoughts and just eating. So no writing, no TV, no music, no nothing. That 36 hours gave me enough space to detach a little bit. And so I then used to charge my phone outside of my bedroom. And so I did that for like almost, over a year, actually. And the only reason that I now charge my phone is still in my room, but albeit now it's on the floor and it's further away from where I sleep, is just because I needed to kind of have it with me. And because I didn't want it left outside in case, I had a leak, and I didn't want the phone to kind of get ruined. And so that's the only reason that I've kind of brought it back in. But having that distance, I think, is very important.
I'm actually not allowed to have my phone in my room when I sleep. There are actually two reasons for that. One reason is because of radiation, and that my mom doesn't want that near me when I sleep for long periods of time, because
Mm-hmm.
I have it next to me throughout the entire day.
Yeah.
She wants that kind of hopefully 12-hour gap if I'm sleeping for 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
She wants that kind of break from exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is the temptation of not being able to go to sleep and, oh my God, there's a phone next to me.
Yeah.
Instead of going to sleep and laying down and just thinking, there's
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna go like sit on TikTok or YouTube or
Well, it's very
Instagram.
addictive, right?
I don't deny that. And I've been trying to work on like what social media I go on and how and for how long.
Mm.
So yeah, but another restriction actually that I completely agree with is like my accounts. Like for Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
I actually did not have a Facebook account until last year because it was needed for school because
Right.
I'm banned and we got like updates and notifications via Facebook.
Okay.
So that was the only reason I got on a Facebook account.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all private accounts. So to be able to like friend me or friend you or whatever, you would have to send a request.
Mm-hmm.
Those requests, I would like see who's who. And I'd always ask my parents, do I allow this person?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes if they're family, now that's an exception. Like I know a lot of family people have followed me on Instagram, like for
Mm-hmm.
instance you,
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of people from my dad's side of the family. And so that's always nice because I get to see like what pictures they post and everything. But that's another thing that's been pretty restricted, and I completely agree with that because there are some people out there that are
They're not who
not
they say they are.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, we're all, again, we're all navigating this. And I think even for adults to like realize, to have their own sort of boundaries with social media, is important. And for me, with Facebook, I only joined it in 2008. So I think people were joining in 2006, but I was relatively late. And the only reason that I joined was because there was going to be a 20-something year reunion for my school in Istanbul. And so I wanted to kind of be part of that and see the messages and connect with people. But I only joined Instagram 4 years ago. And I had restrictions back when I joined that I would only accept people that I had met in person and that I knew. But little by little, as I have kind of joined different groups or done courses and built connections with people that I haven't met in person who live around the world, I've made that choice. But it's a conscious choice, and I think that being able to make conscious choices and start learning how to make conscious choices is part of the adulting process that you're going through. And there'll be there'll be more choices as you progress. So it's good to practice with the simpler ones now.
Right.
So I know that you are a very creative person. You have been for a long time. Tell me some of the things that you love and what brings you joy, what makes you kind of come alive.
I absolutely love to read. Reading has been something I've done from such a little age.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the first chapter book I've ever so there are two kind of firsts for me for chapter books. It was the first chapter book I've ever read with someone,
Mm-hmm.
which is the book
The Islands of Adventure.
Island of Adventures, the first castle one, I believe.
Yeah.
No, it was just Island of Adventures, I think.
Yeah.
That was the first chapter book I've ever read with someone, and so that's always special to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess that kind of formed my love for reading a little bit, because now when I read, I always kind of like, I remember that, oh my God, I was so little, and I remember us laying in the guest bedroom and you reading to me, and that was always, I look forward to that when I was younger.
I mean, that was really fun that I got to share books that I loved when I was a child with you, like all of the Enid Blyton books.
Yeah.
And I also remember when I would sleep on the trundle bed in your room, and because I'm not a morning person, and you would always get up earlier than me, and I would say, Anya, go read, and then you'd read very quietly for a little bit, and then you'd be like, Auntie Lara, it's 15 minutes have passed. I'd be like, okay, when the big hand gets a little bit more to the number 6, and then you'd poke me, and then a way of easing myself awake was to have you read to me out loud. These are some of my favorite memories too.
Another first for me would be the Harry Potter series, which is actually one of my favorite books series. It's the first chapter book I've ever read by myself. Completely on my own, no one reading to me. And that's always kind of something I hold dear, because I held reading to such a high place in my life. To be able to read my first chapter book by myself was kind of like a big milestone for me that I've always looked forward to. And when I finally did, I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And yeah, that was great. So
it's like a feeling of freedom, right?
it is because it's like, oh my gosh, I was restricted to something that had pictures in it, and I wasn't allowed to use my own imagination to create pictures of the story, and now I can. Like, I imagined this humongous castle for Harry Potter, and there was this humongous lake, and it had a giant squid in it. It was always fun to imagine, like the squid just peeking its head out and just waving one of its tentacles at the school or something.
So, I know sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. I was just saying, so that was something that I always held dear. So yeah.
And I know that you love the Harry Potter movies as well, but are there any other movies that you really like?
I actually really like the Avengers movies, partly because they kind of came out when I was growing up. And so it's kind of like, it's almost a childhood series that you would watch on TV. And so when these came out, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm waiting for the next movie, or I'm waiting for the next episode to come out. And so that's always something like that I also kind of hold dear, because that's not something not everyone can have that opportunity to like be excited for something and be like, oh my gosh, it just came out, we're gonna go to the movies and see it. So
yeah.
And
we also share another favorite film, right?
Oh yeah, Wonder. That one was amazing. I love the message behind it as well.
What was the message for people who haven't seen it?
The message was to not, the most basic message in that I got out of it was not to judge a book by its cover or by someone by their looks, because sometimes behind what might seem to you is not pretty or not normal can be something pretty amazing, and someone extremely smart or someone that has an amazing mind, like creativeness. A more in real life type thing or example would be Stephen Hawking. Like, he's an amazing mind, but he was physically disabled. And so maybe people he didn't know might have, or didn't know him, might have judged him, when in reality he was an amazing scientist. So that's a better example.
If you haven't seen The Theory of Everything, which is the story of his life, the film, I'd recommend it. It's a wonderful, wonderful film.
I've seen like parts and clips of it, because that was when I was in science last year in my science class. We always watch videos, and so my science teacher showed clips of different like movies and science movies and things. So I will have to watch that.
Yeah, it's very inspiring and uplifting, and it's another movie that kind of makes you feel, you know, like Wonder. Wonder is a movie that makes you feel, because the message, as you said, is to, well, be kind. That's like the most important message from it.
Right.
So tell me another thing that brings you joy and that makes you come alive.
Another thing would be hanging out with my friends, actually, mostly because I don't get to see them as often now. So what I used to take for granted every day is now held a little bit more higher esteem, and like my pillar of things that I enjoy. So because I don't get to hang out with them a lot, whenever I do or whenever I call them, it's like, this is exciting, this is fun, it's somewhat new. I say
Mhm.
somewhat because it didn't used to be, but now it is. So that's another thing. Another thing would be playing games.
Mm.
I mentioned earlier Minecraft. Minecraft is a game I've been playing for years, and
Mhm.
I'm actually proud to say I originally got the game before you had to pay for it.
Okay.
Because now you have to pay, like, for mobile, you have to pay like $7-8 for it.
Okay.
To get it on your laptop, you have to pay like $30 for it. So yeah,
So you were one of the original adopters.
yes. I was one of like the original people in like that used to play, because I know a lot of new people, like new adults as well. Like
Mhm.
kids are still coming into Minecraft and being like, "Oh my gosh, this is so amazing." So
Did you get to build your, huge mansion?
yeah, so they're two game modes that weren't actually originally there, but the two game modes are survival and creative. Survival is where you have to, exactly what it sounds like, survive.
Okay.
There are mobs like zombies and stuff that you have to like fight off and kill.
Mhm.
You have to like break down trees. You have to like mine for resources like gold, silver. No, not silver, iron. Sorry.
It's okay.
Lapis for enchantments to enchant your armor and swords. You can build
Ooh.
houses. So you'd have to actually build a house and stuff to be able to be safe from all of like the bad hostile mobs.
Okay.
You'd also have to like kill sheep and things, even though they look so cute, for food.
Okay.
You would also farm, so that's for survival. But for creative, which is actually the main game mode I used to play on, was where you had access to all of the blocks that were created, and you wouldn't have to go search for them. And you can just build. You could fly, so it would be easier to build. And yeah, that's the game mode. I used to build humongous houses, as you said earlier. And actually, recently, I just built this really cool modern mansion. So
Mhm.
that was fun.
What did you end up deciding to do with your floor on it?
Oh, for my floor, I decided to have a mix of the other two floors. So one of them was like ocean or like
Okay.
water, and the other one was kind of the grounds. And I kind of mixed air into it as well. So I had a like floor, the floor of my 5-story tall floor is water. So that's where my axolotls are.
Mhm.
And like fish and dolphins and stuff. And then I'd have floating islands that are all
Oh,
connected through waterfalls. So to get to the island, I'd swim up the waterfall. So yeah, that's what I
really,
decided
it
to do.
really does sound like something which sparks creativity, and
It is.
allows you to design anything, which is really exciting.
I mean, the only limitation is everything is in block form, so there are no such thing as circles. But
Okay.
that kind of also add to that resourcefulness I said before. So like to create a circle out of blocks, it'd be obviously pixelated because it's blocks. But you would have to, there are ways to create circles, but there are no circular blocks in Minecraft.
Right. So it's about making things kind of sort of adjust and fit. And So speaking about creativity, I know that you have an opinion about creativity in schools, and whether there needs to be more of it, like, or the way that creativity is sort of taught. Let's talk a little bit about that. The example that you had told me about, what was it, when you were in elementary school? Do you remember that one?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
So when I was in elementary school, we had an art class that we used to have like every week. And my art teacher would hand us a piece of paper, set out the coloring and drawing pencils, markers, crayons, etc. And she'd show us a picture of what we had to draw.
Mm-hmm.
And we were to copy it to the best of our ability instead of drawing what we wanted to draw and what we saw in our minds. And to me, looking back now, that kind of struck me as something that isn't good in a way, because one, it's kind of giving little kids an idea as to what art is, when art is your creativity, not something that someone has set boundaries on.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a better way to put it is there should be no boundaries to art, because different people see different things as art. Like, there was a saying that I've heard, I might not say this correctly, but it's one man's trash is another man's treasure. So that can be related to art. Like, what one person might see as complete utter garbage, another person can see as complete utter beauty. And to me, I was like, that kind of struck me as something that shouldn't be happening. Like, in art class, you should be handed pens and pencils and markers and be told to draw what comes to mind, or what you think is art, or something that you want to draw, instead of being told to copy something.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that the thing about when you're told to copy something, as you said, it's kind of shutting down the expansiveness of what could come from your mind, right? Because creativity, for me, the definition is not just drawing a picture. It's the expression, the fullest expression of who you are as a human. And you can be creative in art. You can be creative in making things. You can be creative in using your voice, how you dress, cooking. It's so many things fall within creativity, but ultimately it's what comes out of you as a human, right?
Right.
And the other thing that I think that I learned, I remember reading this, I guess maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and then the minute I read this, I forwarded it to all my friends who are parents. And it was sort of things that that aren't helpful when you're, to tell your children. So things that we say commonly, but actually the person who wrote the article explained why that isn't the most helpful thing and gave solutions. And one of the things was about art. And it's that when you see a child drawing a picture, a lot of the time, the adult will come up to the child and be like, oh, that's so pretty, right? That's so beautiful. And they're not doing it with any malintent. They think they want to sort of encourage the child and, make the child feel good for what they're producing. But a more helpful question is to say, oh, I love the colors you've used there, or what is it that you are drawing, or tell me about this, and pointing to something to let the child start expressing what it is that they see in the picture. And the reason why that's better than the first comment of, oh, that's so beautiful, is the word beautiful is making a value judgment. So even though it's not said, the child could then think that, oh, my painting is only good if it's beautiful, which again puts a limit. And I'd never thought about it like that. And so I've made a point of, when you guys do something, I ask you those questions, because there were a lot of different suggestions in that article, but that is the one that really stood out for me. And that's the one that I've really kind of implemented in practice. you talked about the Gold Star study.
Oh, yes. So I wasn't actually able to find exactly what it was.
Okay, but tell us what you know about it, because it's still helpful.
What I know about it is there was a study done at like in a school, and it had to do with young kids, elementary school kids. And they took one half of the class, and every time they do something, they gave them gold stars.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other half of the class, they gave some like verbal agreement, or just like, oh my gosh, that's nice, or something like that. And then after a while, they gave the gold stars to that one group. They just stopped giving the gold stars, and the kids stopped drawing. And so it was kind of a here's a gold star. They kind of said that, not euphoria, but the
excitement, the validation.
Right, the validation of getting that gold star was associated with drawing, instead of it just being something good.
To something that you do for your own pleasure, or something that you did because you enjoyed it.
It was something that they did for that gold star.
Yeah.
And when they stopped giving the gold star, the kids stopped drawing.
Which is basically a lesson in motivation, right? So in that study, one half of the kids, the gold star kids, were being driven by extrinsic motivation, right?
Right.
And then the other half of the kids were being driven by intrinsic motivation. They drew and they didn't get a gold star because they wanted to. And that's also a really important lesson in life, is, you know, what are you going to do that drives you? You know, why are you doing what you're doing? And extrinsic motivation can be very powerful, but it's not always helpful, and it kind of makes you lose sight as to whether you're enjoying something in the first place.
Right.
So I found that very helpful, and thank you for sharing that with us, because I hadn't heard of that study. So hopefully, you know, it will kind of make other people think a little bit as well, because that applies to so many other things, not just drawing in school. And while we're on the subject of school, what are some of the things you feel about how education could be adapted to be a little bit more helpful?
I feel like there are a lot of classes that aren't needed for some people. Like, some people right off the bat know exactly what they want to be. Like, for instance, Elsa always wanted to do something like with animals or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly
Yeah, with animals. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, I know she will need, like, the classes she would have to take would be things to do with biology, things to do with medication, because veterinary
science.
Veterinary science. She won't really need much of like advanced math classes. Like, she wouldn't need to take trigonometry, she wouldn't need to take calculus. And so I feel like if someone knows exactly what they need to do or what they want to do in life, they shouldn't have to take classes that would hinder them, like later on. Because instead of taking a trigonometry class or a calculus class, they could be taking a more advanced class of you literally just said the word and I completely forgot it again.
Veterinary or biology, veterinary science.
Biology or animal biology or medication for animals. We're gonna say that.
Yeah. What are some of the classes, because you came up with some really interesting ones that you think would help in life?
So in a couple of years, I will be like going off to college, and because of that, I will need to know how to do taxes and how to do, well, I would need more work with the law, basically, just in general. Not because I want to be a lawyer, but because laws are a key part in our society today. I feel like those are some classes that should be given, like a law, just talking more about the laws that kind of bind us as a society, as well as taxes, because I have absolutely no clue how to do those, what they are, how much they affect our lives. I just hear the word taxes and at the end of the year thrown around in conversations, and I am completely clueless. And I feel like that's something that should be a mandatory class, but
And
isn't.
also like managing money, right? Like when you're an adult, you're going to start like figuring out how to, start being responsible for money in little ways, and then of course when you get a job. So I think those kinds of classes, teaching you how to adult, so how to manage money, life skills.
Life skills, yes.
Yeah, like how to communicate, with each other, how to listen to points of view, how to think critically. I think these are all very essential classes that children.
One would be just talking to people, like how to communicate.
Yeah.
Because I know lots of people don't. And for a while, I don't, and I probably don't know everything and how to talk to people either.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be like another beneficial class that just isn't given.
Yeah.
So.
I totally agree with you. And, who knows how education will unfold as we move through, the years. I think that COVID has probably given schools some ideas. And I think that, the way that things unfold will hopefully be, more useful for children. And really, there's been so much talk about revamping the education system. So I love your ideas. So darling, we're going to bring part 1 to a close, and then we're going to be back in part 2. So thank you so much for doing this with me. Thank you for sharing everything that you've shared so far, and we'll be back in part 2.
Okay, you're welcome. By the way, I absolutely love this idea, and I am super excited to be here and be able to be a part of this. So,
well, thank you so much for that. You were the first person who said yes as well. The first person I asked, and the first person who said an emphatic yes in the early hours of the morning, and who actually was so excited about it that we were like, do you want to do it tomorrow? And you helped me come up with some questions as well. So yes, you've definitely been very critical in this process, and I've really loved collaborating with you. Okay. All right, everyone, we will see you in part 2.